In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to overtake properly. So make sure you stay tuned, because after this video, nobody will be able to stop you from getting past them. Overtaking is a vital part of driving, whether it be on the road or on a track, in real life or on a simulator. The best drivers perfect the art of overtaking. It's a clear and tangible demonstration of how much quicker you are than the chump in the other car. Being able to overtake is one of the greatest feelings in racing. Ultimately, it displays skill, respect, and your ability to make split-second decisions to other drivers and any spectators. In this overtaking crash course, I'll be covering the theory behind overtaking and then taking you through a couple of overtaking methods that every driver should know. Finally, I'll be covering some overtaking mistakes that every rookie driver makes, so you'll know how to correct your own driving. So make sure you don't go anywhere. Racing is a gentleman's sport. In any situation, showing your opponents respect is a must. In real life, people's lives are literally on the line if you decide to make a rash decision to dive bomb into a hairpin. Although in simulators no physical harm can come of this, we should still treat our opponents as we wish to be treated. Learning to overtake properly and safely is encompassed in this. So is learning how to defend from overtakes, but that is for another video entirely. Generally, these unwritten rules mean a few things in the context of overtaking. Number 1. If your front wheel is not level or in front of your opponent's rear wheel when turning into the corner, you should not go for the overtake. To make a safe overtake, you must be alongside the opponent's car substantially. Number 2. When there is an overlap between two cars on a straight, each driver must respect the space occupied by the other car. Any lateral movement here will cause a collision, so you must give the other driver enough space. It doesn't matter who's ahead or by how much, both of the drivers have the right to continue driving in a straight line. Number 3. Apex ownership. Now this one is a little in depth, but hopefully it should make sense. If you manage to overtake, when you reach the apex is a good measurement if you won the battle or not. For instance, if you are more than halfway alongside the defending car, you have the right to the racing line. If contact happens here, the blame is on the defender. If you are less than halfway alongside the defending car, you do not have the right to the racing line through the corner. If you make contact with the defending car here, the blame for the crash is on you. If your front wheel is ahead of the defender's rear, then both of the drivers have a reasonable claim to the apex and the racing line. If contact occurs here, the blame is to be shared and it will be considered a racing incident. So those were the basic rules of overtaking. Of course, rules are made to be broken, but I always like to follow these rules when racing. It's better to give up the position and not cause a crash. But of course, if you break these rules on an overtake and get away with it, expect your opponent to come right back at you with dirty driving. As I said, racing is a gentleman's sport, so treat it as such. Anyway, now it's time to get into the juicy stuff. So let's go through how to actually do an overtake in chronological order. But before that, I just want to remind you to consider liking and subscribing if you're enjoying the video so far. Oh, and make sure you let me know your best overtaking stories in the comments. The very start of all overtakes comes when you're nowhere near the opponent's car. Maybe you're tailing them from 10 car lengths behind on a straight. This is when you should mirror every movement they take. This is called slipstreaming. The slipstream is the vacuum created in the wake of a moving vehicle. If you get into this vacuum, there will be considerably less wind resistance affecting your car, or in layman's terms, less drag. This will not only make your car faster, but your car will be far more stable. This allows you to catch the car in front, even if you're driving at exactly the same pace. So once you've caught the car in front, you need to put them under pressure. If you've ever had a tailgater behind you in real life, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Having a car that is close behind you is extremely distracting and hinders your judgment massively. It's the exact same in sim racing. If you tail a car constantly in their rearview mirror, it's going to put them under a lot of stress. Putting pressure on the car in front is a hard thing to do, as you'll have to match their speed without rear-ending them. But if done correctly, this should make them a lot slower and it will present an opportunity to overtake. Being patient is an important part of overtaking. If you attempt to overtake at the wrong time, it could end in disaster. Now you may have heard Ayrton Senna's mantra, you're no longer a racing driver if you don't go for a gap that still exists. While this may sound cool, it just isn't practical. You shouldn't try to shoehorn your car into every single gap that exists. You need to wait for the perfect moment to overtake. Point being, you need to be extremely patient when overtaking. Pick your moments and only go for the overtake if you're 100% certain you won't break the rules we mentioned earlier. If you aren't sure, there's no shame in backing off and waiting for another opportunity. In fact, your opponent will probably respect you more for it. So now we have all the boring stuff out the way, it's time to cover overtaking methods. But before that, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why there isn't a dedicated website for toge mods? Well, fear not, because now there is. If you head on over to simracingbloke.com, I have listed all the best toge mods that I use in my videos for you to download. So make sure you go and check it out. It's a pretty good website, I have to say, and I'll be adding new mods all the time, so make sure you check back and download them all. As the attacker, you always have the element of surprise. So you shouldn't reveal your cards too early. You should only make a move once you're about to enter the braking zone. It's at this point the opponent will take his eyes off the rear view mirror. If you attempt to make a move before the braking zone, the defender can easily hinder your overtake. So after slipstreaming up to the car ahead, you'll have a noticeable boost, even coming out of the slipstream. You can use this momentary boost in power to pull out from behind the opponent's car and take the inside line. Then you just need to hold your line and enter the corner. Using this method, you'll be off the racing line, so proceed with caution. Remember the rules I mentioned earlier. Don't go for the overtake unless your car is substantially alongside the other. This is very basic stuff, so I'll just leave it at that. The second method I'll be covering today is the switchback. It's possibly one of the advanced overtaking methods that you'll see most on a toge. It's typically performed on hairpins or extremely tight corners. If the defending driver takes the inside line, the attacking driver can try to take a wider entry. This results in a later apex and a straighter path under acceleration, therefore a faster exit. This method is extremely useful when a defender is hoarding the inside line. It's an almost undefendable attack, due to the fact that it is all down to the line you are on. The final method is also used against a defender holding the inside line. Some of the greatest overtaking maneuvers in motorsport history have been achieved using this method. This method is called going around the outside. This is a dangerous method, but is something that a defender usually isn't expecting. So if you can pull off overtaking on the outside, you should definitely use it. If you're already more than half a car length ahead of the defender's car by the apex, you are entitled to cut into the racing line on the corner exit. If there's a second corner which travels in the opposite direction, you'll now have the inside line. However, some disputes on the gentleman's rules may arise here. For instance, after the apex, the defending driver on the inside will naturally want to take the racing line and exit as wide as possible. But you'll also be exiting the corner on the same line. If you're slightly ahead of the opponent's car at the apex, the line is rightfully yours. However, if you're behind the defending car at the apex, you should concede the position and either back off or take action to avoid the collision. So those are 3 overtaking methods that every driver should know. There are some variations of each, but the basic theory is the same. Using this knowledge, you should now know how to overtake in any situation at any corner. But I do have some closing thoughts. When driving in a race, it's not about who can brake the hardest and latest and who can get on the accelerator quickest. Although these facets are always helpful, it's about reacting to what is happening around you and taking advantage of the situations that present themselves. If you come across a virtual driver that is erratic and dangerous while defending, it can often pay dividends to bide your time and let them make a mistake themselves. If they don't look like they're in control of their car, you don't want to be getting in close proximity to them. Likewise, if they aren't in control of the car, they'll likely crash at some stage. Even more so if you put them under pressure like I mentioned earlier. It's always better to be patient than risk a race-ending crash. Always pick your battles, as it takes 2 drivers with awareness to be able to battle and race hard, otherwise it will usually end in disaster. In the same vein, you should not go for an overtake if you are not in control of your own car. Braking later than your opponent is all well and good, but if you can't take your car through the corner in a controlled manner, there is literally no point in going for the overtake, as you'll either lose control or cause a crash. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see rookie drivers make when overtaking. They're just too rash and going way too hot. Patience is the key. So that was my guide on overtaking. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you found it helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button for more Assetto Corsa tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.